The queen mocked my primitive disease. Hours later, she was begging me not to fight the transport shuttle descended through Virelia's atmosphere like a silver arrow, cutting through clouds that glowed with a faint violet hue. Eli Carter stared through the viewport, his hands clasped tightly on the armrest. The planet below shimmered with strange energy, forests glowing faintly, rivers winding like liquid crystal. Despite the beauty, there was an edge to the world, an unspoken warning that this was a place where humans were not welcome. Eli's heart beat faster, not from fear but from anticipation. He had faced tough situations before, but this mission was different. He wasn't just a medic anymore. He was humanity's representative in a palace filled with aliens who considered humans little more than primitive creatures. As the shuttle touched down on the polished landing platform, the doors opened with a soft hiss. Eli stepped out, his boots meeting the sleek metal surface. The air smelled faintly metallic but carried a strange, sweet fragrance beneath it. A small group of Virelian attendants approached, tall and slender with skin that shimmered in subtle hues. Their eyes were large and reflective, giving them a perpetual sense of watchfulness. None of them spoke, their movements fluid and precise. Eli felt the weight of their gaze but kept his composure. Years of training as a medic had prepared him for tense situations, though nothing had prepared him for walking into the heart of alien arrogance. He was led through corridors that seemed to hum with energy. The walls were transparent in some areas, revealing the city outside. A city that defied human architecture, with towers that spiraled like liquid and bridges that glowed faintly under the soft light of Virelia's twin suns. Eli couldn't help but glance at the wonders around him, but he reminded himself why he was here. He was not here to admire their city. He was here to protect humanity's reputation, and possibly to save a life no one else could. Finally, he was brought into a vast chamber. At the far end sat Queen Liara, elevated on a platform that made her loom over everyone else. She was magnificent, with skin that reflected soft gold light and hair that moved subtly as if it had a life of its own. Her eyes, sharp and intelligent, settled on Eli immediately. She raised one delicate hand, signaling the attendants to stop. The room fell silent, the hum of energy fading as if the walls themselves were listening. "You are the human who claims to heal what we cannot," the queen said, her voice smooth, with a musical quality that made every word land like a precise note. Her lips curved into a faint, almost imperceptible smile, one that carried a hint of mockery. Eli felt a shiver, but he held his posture straight. "I am Eli Carter," he replied, keeping his voice steady. "I have been sent to assist you, your majesty." The queen's eyes flicked to his hands, then back to his face. "Humans are fragile creatures," she said lightly. "Even your simplest ailments, your primitive diseases, are foreign to us. And yet you travel here claiming knowledge that surpasses our greatest healers. Tell me, how can one so weak claim to help one so powerful?" Eli did not flinch. He had expected condescension, but not quite this bold. "Your Majesty," he said carefully, "fragility is not weakness. Sometimes understanding comes from surviving what others cannot. My people have learned to study, to adapt, and to find solutions in ways others might overlook." The queen laughed softly, a sound that echoed through the chamber. It was not cruel exactly, but it carried a sharpness, a reminder of her superiority. "Very well, human, let us see if your words hold any weight. Observe closely, for you will not have many chances." An attendant stepped forward, and Eli noticed the queen's hand resting lightly on her side. There was a faint tremor, almost imperceptible. His instincts, honed by years of human medicine, whispered that something was wrong. Not just a simple ailment, but a subtle, complex issue that a typical human doctor would not notice. "Your Majesty," Eli said gently, "if I may, I observe slight irregularities in your vitals. They are not immediately dangerous, but they may develop into something serious if left unchecked." The queen's eyes narrowed and she straightened slightly. "Irregularities? My healers see nothing amiss. Are you suggesting my people are inadequate, or that I am fragile?" Eli shook his head. "Not fragile, your Majesty, just overlooked. Sometimes a fresh perspective reveals what experience alone cannot." The queen leaned back slightly, her expression unreadable. "And you believe a human can perceive what centuries of Virelian science cannot?" "How amusing." She tilted her head, studying him as if weighing his worth. "You will have your chance, though I suspect it will amuse us more than it will help. Tell me, human, are you aware of what you face here? The disease I harbor is unlike anything on your primitive world. It is a puzzle, and one that even my best healers cannot solve. Do you truly think you can succeed where they have failed? Eli held her gaze calmly. I believe there is always a way to help, Your Majesty. Sometimes it is not brute strength or advanced tools, but observation, understanding, and timing. Her smile widened slightly, almost amused. Confidence is not lacking, I see. Perhaps that is your first advantage. For the next hour, Eli was permitted to examine the queen, though under careful scrutiny. Instruments far beyond anything on Earth surrounded him, monitoring his every movement. He noted the subtle changes in her pulse, the slight unevenness in the rhythm of her breath, the faint shimmer under her skin that indicated the spread of an internal complication. Each observation strengthened his conviction. This was not a hopeless case. It required precision, patience, and human insight that the Virelians' rigid methods could not provide. The queen watched him silently, her expression a mixture of curiosity and disbelief. At one point, Eli noticed a flicker of something behind her eyes, a hint that she might be reconsidering her assessment of him, though pride would not allow her to admit it. As he concluded his examination, Eli stepped back and met her gaze. Your Majesty, with careful monitoring and a methodical approach, your condition can be stabilized. I will need access to certain resources and your trust, even if minimal. The queen tilted her head again, the faintest trace of a smirk returning. Trust. You ask for the trust of a queen who watches her people with unmatched scrutiny. You are bold, human, bold and foolish. Perhaps that will serve you well, or perhaps it will hasten your failure. Eli offered a small nod. I only ask for the chance to try. The queen leaned back and considered him for a long moment. Then finally, she waved her hand, dismissing him. Very well, human, you may begin, but know this, if you fail, your species will be reminded why it is deemed inferior. Eli bowed slightly, hiding the flicker of anxiety that surged through him. The weight of the mission pressed on his shoulders, but he also felt a spark of determination. He would not fail. Humanity's reputation and the queen's life rested in his hands. As he left the chamber, the corridors outside felt quieter, almost expectant. Something was stirring within the palace, though it was invisible to the naked eye. Eli sensed it, an energy that pulsed faintly in the walls, and he knew that time was critical. The disease that no Virelian healer had been able to cure was moving quickly, and he had to act with both precision and care. He made his way to the laboratory assigned to him, a space filled with devices that seemed almost alive, screens shimmering with data he barely recognized. Eli took a deep breath and began familiarizing himself with the equipment. Though it was alien in every sense, he saw patterns, ways to apply human knowledge to interpret what the instruments revealed. His mind worked quickly, translating data into strategies, observations into potential solutions. Hours passed. Eli moved methodically, documenting every detail, testing harmless procedures, and cross-referencing his findings with human medical principles. He was careful not to alarm the attendants or disrupt the palace's routines. The weight of expectation was immense, yet he thrived under it. Humans had survived against impossible odds before, and he was determined to prove that they could do so again. As night fell on Virelia, Eli paused for a moment, staring out the laboratory's viewport. The city below glowed softly under the twin moons, a sight both breathtaking and intimidating. He felt a strange connection to this world, as if the challenge ahead was not just about curing a disease, but about bridging two vastly different civilizations. Finally, he prepared to present his first set of recommendations. He knew the queen would scrutinize every detail, every action. She would mock, she would doubt, but he also knew that she would have no choice but to recognize his competence if he succeeded. And deep down, Eli welcomed the challenge. It was not just a test of skill. It was an opportunity to show the galaxy that humans, despite their primitive beginnings, could achieve greatness beyond expectation. As he reviewed his notes one last time, a soft alert blinked on one of the devices. The queen's vitals were shifting subtly, a sign that the disease was not waiting. Time was moving faster than anyone realized. Eli tightened his jaw, straightened his posture, and prepared to return to the queen. This was his moment. Every human instinct, every lesson learned, and every ounce of determination would be needed in the hours to come. He stepped out of the laboratory and into the corridor, feeling the weight of the palace and its secrets pressing around him. The queen awaited, unaware of just how much her life, and perhaps her understanding of humanity, was about to change. Eli Carter moved forward, calm, focused, and ready to show that what humans lacked in brute strength, they more than made up for in resilience, intelligence, and heart. The first step had been taken. The real challenge was about to begin. The chamber felt colder than usual as Eli Carter entered, carrying the small, portable diagnostic tools he had adapted to Virelian technology. Queen Liara sat on her elevated platform, her posture rigid, eyes sharp. Though her golden skin shimmered under the ambient light, Eli noticed a subtle pallor he had not seen before. Her breaths were measured, controlled, but a faint irregularity in the rhythm betrayed the silent struggle within her body. The Queen's attendants stood nearby, their reflective eyes glinting with suspicion. Eli could feel their skepticism like a weight pressing against him, a constant reminder that he was an outsider, a human among beings who considered humans weak and fragile. "You return, human," the Queen said, her tone cool but curious. "Have you come to marvel at our advanced systems or to confirm your failure?" She allowed a hint of amusement to slip through, though her gaze betrayed a trace of unease. "I have come to help your majesty," Eli replied calmly, setting his tools on a nearby table. "Your condition is evolving. There are subtle changes that require careful observation. I can stabilize them, but only if I can work without restriction." The Queen tilted her head, studying him. Her curiosity was now tinged with doubt. "And you believe your human methods, your primitive ways, can match the skill of centuries of Virelian science?" Eli met her gaze steadily. "I believe perspective is as important as knowledge. Sometimes the simplest observation reveals what the most complex machines cannot. Please allow me to demonstrate." The Queen's lips curved into a faint smile, the first sign of genuine interest he had seen. "Very well, human, you may begin, but know this, failure is not an option. If you fail, your species will once again be reminded of its insignificance." Eli nodded and approached the Queen, carefully monitoring her vitals with the advanced instruments. He noted the irregularity in her heartbeat and the subtle fluctuations in the energy patterns across her skin. These were not random. They followed a pattern he had seen in humans, albeit adapted to Virelian physiology. It was rare, but not impossible. The Queen's body had responded to the disease in a way that could be understood if approached logically. He began by administering a diagnostic scan, carefully adjusting the alien machinery to translate the data into a format he could interpret. It was delicate work. The machines were highly sensitive, designed for Virelian biology, and one mistake could trigger false readings. Eli worked slowly, methodically, cross-referencing each result with his understanding of human pathology and evolutionary principles. The Queen watched silently, her sharp eyes following every move. At times, her expression softened slightly, though she would quickly mask it behind a veneer of pride. She was intrigued, and yet she refused to show any weakness. Eli understood her perfectly. This was a creature who had ruled with authority and expectation her entire life. Acknowledging the need for help was not something she did lightly. Hours passed as Eli worked. He adjusted settings, observed patterns, and proposed minor, non-invasive interventions. Each time he suggested a change, the attendants would whisper among themselves, their disbelief barely concealed. Eli remained focused, not reacting to their murmurs. His concentration was absolute. The Queen's life and humanity's credibility depended on it. As he finished one phase of the diagnostic, he noted something unusual. The disease was not static. It was evolving within her, responding to her body's defenses. It was clever, almost adaptive. Virelian science had not accounted for such variability, but humans thrived on adaptation. Eli realized that understanding this evolution was the key to stabilizing her condition. He spoke gently, "Your Majesty, the disease is reacting to your body's unique defenses. It is not beyond control, but it requires a careful, adaptive approach, one that must consider both your physiology and the progression of the illness." The Queen's eyes narrowed. "Adaptive. You ask me to trust the instincts of a human when even my healers fail?" Bold words. She leaned slightly forward, her gaze scrutinizing him. "Yet I find myself curious. Show me, human, show me if your methods hold merit." Eli smiled faintly, a small acknowledgement that he understood the weight of her words. He began the next phase of his plan, introducing carefully measured adjustments that would encourage her body to combat the disease without aggressive interference. He monitored the energy fluctuations across her skin, noting how they aligned with his proposed interventions. Each small success reinforced his confidence, though he knew the challenge was far from over. As the hours wore on, the queen's condition stabilized slightly, enough that her pallor softened and her breathing became more even. The attendants glanced at each other, silent shock evident in their posture. Eli noticed the queen's expression change subtly. For the first time, she allowed herself a moment of curiosity, leaning forward slightly to observe him more closely. "You see," Eli said quietly, "sometimes the solution is not in overpowering a problem, but in guiding it, understanding it, and giving it a path to resolve itself. Even the most advanced science can benefit from perspective." The queen's lips pressed into a thin line, her pride warring with the undeniable truth of his words. "You speak with confidence, human, too much perhaps, but I see that you are correct. My body responds." "I cannot deny it." She paused, her sharp gaze softening briefly. "You may continue, but do not presume that this changes anything about our differences. Humans remain fragile." Eli nodded, acknowledging her words without comment. Fragility was not weakness. It was adaptability, resilience, and ingenuity, qualities humans had honed through millennia of survival. He continued his careful work, making minor adjustments and documenting every detail. The disease, clever and unpredictable, had slowed its progression, giving him an opportunity to plan the next stage of treatment. During a brief pause, Eli observed the queen in silence. There was something almost human in the subtle lines of concern that appeared around her eyes. She was not accustomed to being in a position where she could not control the outcome, and yet she was learning, slowly, to trust observation over authority. This realization filled Eli with cautious hope. Suddenly, a soft alert chimed from one of the instruments. Eli's heart quickened slightly. The disease was showing signs of accelerated adaptation, responding to subtle cues in her environment. If he did not act carefully, the balance could tip. He adjusted the parameters, introducing a gentle countermeasure that would encourage stability without aggressive intervention. The queen noticed the small changes in the readings and raised an eyebrow. "You manipulate my body without my permission?" she asked, a hint of irritation in her voice. Eli smiled faintly. "Your Majesty, the changes are subtle and designed to assist your body's natural defenses. I am not forcing, only guiding. Think of it as a conversation with your own physiology." The queen considered his words, her expression unreadable. Then slowly she nodded. "Very well, human. I will allow this conversation to continue, but be warned, failure will not be forgiven." Hours turned into night, and Eli worked tirelessly. He adjusted, observed, and readjusted, relying on intuition as much as data. He noted that the disease responded positively to minor shifts in energy levels, subtle environmental changes, and precise timing of interventions. Every detail mattered, and every small victory was a step towards stabilizing the queen's condition. By early morning, the queen's breathing had returned to near-normal patterns. The pallor had faded, and her skin shimmered with its usual golden glow, though faint traces of the disease still lingered. The attendants were visibly impressed, though they would not speak it aloud. Eli took a deep breath, knowing that the real test was not just stabilization but full recovery. The queen leaned forward slightly, studying him with an intensity he had not seen before. "You are persistent, human. I underestimated you." "I admit it." Her voice carried no malice, only a reluctant respect. "Tell me, how does one such as you possess such foresight?" Eli shrugged slightly, choosing his words carefully. "Observation, patience, and understanding. Humans have survived against impossible odds because we learn, adapt, and persist. We are not always the strongest, but we find a way." The queen's eyes softened, though she would not admit it openly. There was a flicker of something in her gaze, acknowledgement, perhaps, of humanity's unexpected strengths. Eli realized that he had not only stabilized her condition, but had also begun to shift her perception of humans entirely. A sudden movement outside the chamber caught Eli's attention. An attendant whispered something to the queen, who straightened instantly, her regal composure returning. "It seems there are developments," she said carefully. "You may continue your work, human. But know that the galaxy watches, and not all eyes are as forgiving as mine." Eli nodded, understanding the subtle warning. The challenge was far from over. The disease had slowed, but it was still evolving, still unpredictable. He would need every ounce of patience, every insight, and every adaptive strategy to ensure success. As he resumed his work, Eli felt a strange sense of connection with the Queen. She was proud, intelligent, and unyielding, yet beneath her facade was a vulnerability that only a careful observer could detect. Humanity and Violia, two worlds so different, were now bound together in this delicate balance, and Eli's role had never been more critical. Hours passed, each moment filled with careful adjustments, observation, and subtle interventions. The Queen's condition continued to improve, though slowly. Every minor success reinforced Eli's confidence, though he knew that the real challenge was still ahead. Finally, as dawn approached, the Queen spoke softly, almost to herself. "Perhaps humans are not as fragile as I believed." Eli paused, noting the quiet shift in her tone. It was not praise exactly, but it was acknowledgement. And in the world of the powerful Violians, acknowledgement was rare and valuable. He smiled faintly, returning to his work. The path ahead was still uncertain, but for the first time, Eli felt that humanity had a chance, not just to stabilize the Queen, but to prove that their ingenuity, adaptability, and perseverance were forces worthy of respect in the galaxy. And so, the first real step of his mission had succeeded. The Queen, once mocking, was beginning to recognize that the so-called primitive human might hold the key not only to survival, but to a new understanding of strength itself. The palace was quiet in the early hours, the soft glow from the twin moons reflecting off the polished surfaces of the corridors. Eli Carter moved carefully, carrying only the instruments he truly needed. Each step echoed slightly, reminding him that he was a human in a world designed for beings far beyond human scale. But he had learned early on that Violians, for all their sophistication, had blind spots. Their focus on precision, protocol, and perfection often prevented them from seeing the simplest truths. Eli intended to use that oversight to his advantage. Queen Liara awaited him in the chamber, seated with her posture perfect, though the subtle tension in her shoulders betrayed the faint remnants of her illness. Her golden skin shone softly under the ambient lights, but now it carried warmth, the first visible sign that Eli's methods were having a real effect. He stepped forward and greeted her formally, aware of the delicate balance between respect and authority he had to maintain. "You have returned, human," the Queen said, her voice carrying a trace of measured curiosity. "Tell me, do you come with solutions or only more words?" "I come with progress, Your Majesty," Eli replied calmly. "The disease is slowing. It is responding to careful observation and guided interventions. There is still work to be done, but the path forward is clear." The Queen studied him intently, her expression unreadable. "Path forward? Humans speak of paths as if the universe bends to their steps. But I have seen countless species, countless healers, all claiming clarity and certainty. Yet the result is always the same. I am unconvinced that you are any different." Eli nodded, accepting her skepticism. He knew that trust, especially from someone like Liara, was not given lightly. "I do not ask for blind trust, Your Majesty. I ask only for the chance to demonstrate results. Observation and careful guidance can succeed where pride and rigid knowledge have failed." She allowed a faint smile, one that softened the edge of her pride. "You speak boldly, human, perhaps too boldly. Yet there is a flicker of truth in your words. Very well. Continue, but know that your work is observed closely by all who serve this palace." Eli began by reviewing the data from his previous observations. The disease, clever and adaptive, had slowed in response to his interventions, but it was not defeated. It shifted within her body, seeking ways to evade control. Eli realized that this was not merely a matter of treatment. It was a test of strategy, patience, and understanding. He adjusted his approach, combining alien instruments with human intuition, noting how small changes in environment, energy patterns, and timing could influence the progression. As he worked, Eli noticed the Queen watching him more closely than before. Her sharp eyes followed every movement, yet they no longer carried mockery. Instead, there was a trace of intrigue, a recognition that perhaps humans were not as fragile as she had believed. It was a subtle shift, almost imperceptible, but Eli felt it. This was the first sign that his efforts were changing more than her condition. They were beginning to change her perspective. Hours passed as Eli monitored the Queen, recording every subtle variation in her vitals and energy patterns. The disease continued to adapt, but each time it responded to his interventions, it revealed new insights about her physiology and resilience. Eli realized that this was a partnership in motion. He was guiding, but the queen's body was actively participating, responding intelligently to his subtle cues. This was a level of interaction that no machine, no rigid protocol could replicate. The attendants whispered among themselves, their disbelief hidden behind polite postures. Eli ignored them, focusing entirely on the queen. He adjusted the instruments, introduced minor, non-invasive stimuli, and observed the effects. Slowly, steadily, the queen's condition improved. Her pallor diminished, her breathing stabilized, and the subtle tremor in her energy flow lessened. Every improvement was small but cumulative, and Eli knew that the key to ultimate success lay in patience. At one point, the queen spoke, her voice softer than before. "I observe change, my body is responding, yet I cannot fathom why a human could guide this with such precision. Are your people always so clever?" Eli smiled faintly. "Humans have survived countless challenges, Your Majesty. Often what we lack in raw strength, we make up for in observation, adaptability, and persistence. We are not always the strongest, but we find a way to endure and overcome." The queen's eyes softened, though her pride remained intact. "You speak as though humans are more than you appear. Perhaps there is merit in your species after all." She leaned back, her gaze distant for a moment. "Yet I remain cautious. I have seen arrogance before in many forms, and it often leads to ruin. I hope your persistence is genuine and not mere pride." Eli continued his work, aware of the subtle shift in her tone. The queen was beginning to see him not as a primitive human, but as a problem solver capable of navigating challenges that even her advanced healers could not. This recognition was delicate, easily disrupted, but it was real. By midday, the queen's condition had improved noticeably. The disease, though still present, had been slowed significantly. Eli's careful interventions, guided by observation and subtle adjustments, were proving effective. He monitored her closely, recording every detail, aware that any misstep could reverse progress. "Human," the queen said quietly, "I must admit your methods are unlike anything I have witnessed. My body responds to your guidance in ways I cannot explain." "Perhaps I misjudged you," Eli nodded respectfully. "Perception often underestimates what it cannot yet understand, Your Majesty. My goal is not to replace your healers, but to provide a perspective that complements their knowledge." She studied him, her expression thoughtful. "A perspective, yes. Perhaps that is something I need to learn, not only for myself, but for my people. They value strength and precision above all else, yet they overlook insight and intuition. Perhaps your methods are a lesson in subtlety." As Eli adjusted the instruments for the next phase of treatment, he noticed that the disease was attempting to shift again, seeking a new path within her body. It was adaptive, intelligent, and relentless. He smiled faintly. This was not a battle of brute force, but a dialogue, a test of understanding. Humans excelled at such challenges, not through strength, but through patience and ingenuity. Hours passed with careful monitoring, minor adjustments, and continuous observation. Eli noted that the queen's body was responding better to interventions that encouraged natural resistance rather than forcing change. Every small victory strengthened his confidence, though he remained aware that the disease's adaptability could still pose a threat if neglected. The queen spoke again, this time with curiosity replacing her previous skepticism. "You guide my body, and yet you do not command it. You suggest, and it listens. There is elegance in this approach. My healers rely on certainty and dominance." "Perhaps humans see the world differently," Eli nodded. "Humans often survive not because we dominate, but because we observe, adapt, and persist. Flexibility can be more powerful than rigidity." She leaned back, a faint smile on her lips. "Flexibility, yes. Perhaps that is a lesson I needed to learn." By late afternoon, the queen's energy had returned to near-normal levels. The disease was still present, but its progression had slowed dramatically. Eli felt a cautious sense of accomplishment. The queen, once mocking and scornful, now observed him with a mixture of curiosity and respect. He had not only stabilized her condition, but begun to alter her perception of humanity itself. A sudden alert from the instruments drew his attention. The disease was attempting another shift, subtle but significant. Eli adjusted his approach, introducing minor, non-invasive interventions that encouraged stability without triggering any negative reactions. The queen watched intently, her expression betraying a trace of tension. "You continue to manipulate my condition," she said softly, "and yet I feel no harm, only guidance. It is unexpected." Eli smiled faintly. "The goal is always guidance, Your Majesty. Harm is never necessary. Understanding and patience can achieve what force cannot." The queen considered his words, her pride softened but still present. "Perhaps humans are not as weak as I believed. Perhaps there is strength in subtlety, in thought, in persistence." Eli continued his work, methodically observing, adjusting, and guiding. The disease responded positively, though it remained clever and adaptive. Every moment of careful intervention reinforced the subtle truth the queen was beginning to acknowledge. Humans, though physically weaker, possessed ingenuity, resilience, and understanding that could rival even the most advanced Virelian methods. As evening approached, Eli paused briefly to observe the queen. She was seated with a rare moment of stillness, her eyes thoughtful, her posture relaxed for the first time since he had arrived. It was a quiet victory, a recognition that the process of change, both in her body and in her mind, was underway. "Human," she said finally, her voice softer, almost reflective, "I see now that your species has value beyond what appearances suggest. You act with patience, thought, and ingenuity. Perhaps I underestimated humans too greatly." Eli bowed slightly, acknowledging her words. "Perception often underestimates what it does not yet understand, Your Majesty. I am honored that you allow me to demonstrate what humans can achieve." The queen nodded, her eyes returning to their usual sharp focus. "Continue, human. The disease is not yet gone, but your methods may prove effective. You have earned the beginning of my trust." Eli resumed his careful monitoring, aware that the real challenge was still ahead. The disease was clever and adaptive, and the path to full recovery would require continued observation, subtle interventions, and patience. But for the first time, he felt that true progress was possible. As night fell on Virelia, Eli reflected on the day's work. The queen's condition had improved, but more importantly, her perception of humanity had begun to change. What had started as mockery was now cautious respect, and he understood that this was as important a victory as stabilizing her health. Humans, once dismissed as fragile and primitive, were beginning to demonstrate that ingenuity, observation, and persistence could rival even the most advanced civilizations. The day had been long, the challenges immense, but Eli Carter felt a growing sense of hope. He had navigated not only the complexities of alien biology, but the intricacies of pride, perception, and trust. And in doing so, he had shown that humans were not to be underestimated. As he prepared for the night, reviewing his notes and planning the next steps, Eli understood one truth clearly. The real test was only beginning. The queen's body was resilient, but so was the disease. And beyond the chamber, beyond the palace walls, the galaxy was watching. Humanity had made its first mark on Virelia, and the consequences, both subtle and profound, were only beginning to unfold. The next morning, sunlight filtered through the towering windows of the palace, casting long, golden streaks across the polished floor. Eli Carter entered the queen's chamber with measured steps, carrying his instruments and notes. Queen Liara was already awake, seated with her posture flawless, though a faint tension lingered in her shoulders. Her golden skin shone with warmth, a subtle reflection of the progress Eli had helped her achieve. Yet there was a quiet unease beneath the surface. The disease had slowed, yes, but it had not yet been fully controlled. "You have returned," the queen said, her voice steady but softer than it had been before. "Your persistence is remarkable, human. Perhaps even admirable." There was a trace of amusement in her tone, though her eyes were sharp, assessing him with the careful calculation of a ruler who had seen centuries of cunning. "I have returned to continue stabilizing your condition, Your Majesty," Eli replied calmly, setting his tools on the table. "The disease is adaptive, but I am confident that with careful observation and intervention, full recovery is possible." The queen inclined her head, acknowledging him. "I observe your methods closely, and yet I find myself learning from them. My healers rely on rules, routines, and certainty. You rely on intuition and patience. I am curious which will succeed." Eli smiled faintly, sensing the subtle shift in her perception. This was no longer mockery or skepticism. It was curiosity, tinged with respect. Sometimes, Your Majesty, rules and routines are effective only until they meet the unexpected. Observation, adaptation, and patience allow one to navigate what cannot be predicted. The Queen considered this, her gaze softening briefly before returning to its usual sharpness. Perhaps your species possesses more value than I once believed. But be warned, human, curiosity does not grant trust lightly. One misstep and pride will take its place again. Eli nodded respectfully. I understand, Your Majesty. I do not ask for trust without reason. I only ask for the opportunity to demonstrate results. He began the next phase of his work, carefully adjusting the instruments to monitor the Queen's vitals in real time. The disease had slowed, but it was clever, adaptive, and persistent. Eli needed to anticipate its movements within her body, guiding it without forcing it, nudging her physiology toward stability rather than attempting to dominate it. This delicate balance required not just skill, but observation, intuition, and patience, the very traits that humans often relied on to survive against impossible odds. The Queen watched him silently, her hands folded in her lap. For the first time, she allowed herself to observe without judgment, without mockery. Eli noticed the subtle changes in her energy flow, the slight warmth returning to her skin, the steadier rhythm of her breathing. These were signs of progress, though he knew that the disease was far from defeated. Human, she said quietly, her tone almost reflective. I have observed many healers, many species claiming knowledge and power, yet I see in you something different. You act not with arrogance but with patience and strategy. It is unfamiliar and yet effective. Eli bowed slightly. The goal is not to dominate or impress, Your Majesty. It is to guide, to observe, and to ensure the best outcome. Strength is not always measured by force, but by understanding and adaptation. The Queen's eyes narrowed thoughtfully. Understanding and adaptation, two qualities my people rarely value. We rely on certainty and precision, and often we fail to see the subtle forces at work. Perhaps your species teaches a lesson we have forgotten. Eli continued his careful monitoring, introducing subtle interventions and noting the Queen's responses. The disease reacted, as it always had, but now Eli could anticipate its shifts more accurately. Each minor adjustment, each gentle guidance was steering the Queen's body toward recovery, and with every response her confidence, though not her pride, was shifting. Hours passed, and the Queen's condition improved steadily. Eli noticed that her energy, once faintly irregular, now flowed with a subtle harmony. The disease, clever as it was, could not resist the gentle, adaptive guidance he provided. It had learned, in a sense, that force was not the path forward. Flexibility, observation, and patience were stronger. You manipulate my condition, the Queen said at one point, her voice quiet but firm, and yet I feel no harm, only guidance. This is unexpected. The body responds best when it is guided rather than forced, Eli explained. Even the most advanced physiology benefits from subtle adjustments, rather than abrupt commands. Observation reveals what rigidity cannot. The Queen's eyes softened for a moment, though she quickly masked it behind a regal composure. Humans, you may possess wisdom that your appearance does not convey. Perhaps I misjudged you. Eli continued his work, aware that the subtle changes in her tone and demeanor were as important as the improvements in her condition. The Queen was beginning to recognize human ingenuity, persistence, and adaptability. She had mocked him before, dismissed his species as primitive, yet now she was witnessing the value of observation, patience, and creative problem-solving. By midday, the Queen's condition had stabilized further. The pallor was gone, her breathing was even, and the subtle tremor in her energy had disappeared. The disease was still present, but it was contained, weakened by the careful, adaptive interventions Eli had employed. The attendants who had observed his work closely were silent, their disbelief tempered by quiet respect. Eli did not react to them, his focus remained entirely on the Queen. You have achieved something remarkable, the Queen said quietly, her tone almost hesitant. My body responds to your methods in ways I cannot explain. Your persistence, your patience, it is effective. Eli nodded. It is not merely persistence, Your Majesty. It is observation, adaptation, and understanding. Humans survive by learning from challenges, by adjusting to what cannot be predicted. This is how we endure and overcome. The Queen considered this, her expression thoughtful. Endure and overcome? Yes. Perhaps these are qualities I have not valued enough. Your species may have more to offer than I realized. As the hours passed, Eli introduced the final phase of his adaptive strategy. He adjusted subtle environmental factors, gently encouraged energy flow, and monitored her response closely. Each adjustment nudged the disease further toward dormancy, allowing her natural defenses to reclaim dominance. The queen's body responded beautifully, stabilizing under his guidance. For the first time, she leaned forward slightly, studying him closely. Human, you have changed my perspective. I mocked you once, dismissed your species as weak and fragile. Yet I see now there is strength in subtlety, in thought and observation. Your people are clever, resilient, and capable in ways I did not anticipate. Eli bowed slightly. Perception often underestimates what it cannot yet understand, Your Majesty. I am honored that you allow me to demonstrate what humans can achieve. The queen's gaze softened, and for a brief moment, her pride gave way to reflection. Perhaps I have been too rigid, too confident in my assumptions. Perhaps I need to consider perspective, adaptability, and the unexpected. Eli resumed his work, carefully observing her responses to ensure the disease remained contained. Though the challenge was not fully over, the queen's body had regained remarkable stability. Each success reinforced his confidence, though he remained vigilant. By late afternoon, the disease had retreated into dormancy, weakened by the combined effects of adaptive intervention and the queen's own resilient physiology. The queen herself appeared stronger, her movements fluid and her energy steady. She observed Eli with a mixture of respect and quiet astonishment, acknowledging without words the skill and insight he had brought to her care. You have proven yourself human, the queen said softly, her tone carrying both respect and awe. Not only in healing, but in demonstrating qualities I did not expect from your species. Humans may be underestimated at our peril. Eli nodded, a quiet sense of satisfaction filling him. It is not about proving superiority, Your Majesty. It is about understanding, patience, and using knowledge wisely. That is what allows any species to survive and thrive. The queen studied him for a long moment, her eyes reflecting contemplation and newfound appreciation. You have changed not only my body but my perception. Perhaps this is a lesson I will not forget. She paused, then added almost reluctantly, Continue your observations. There is more to learn, and I wish to see the full extent of your methods. Eli resumed his careful monitoring, aware that the trust he had earned was fragile, yet growing. The queen's body remained stable, and the disease no longer posed an immediate threat. But more importantly, the queen herself was beginning to see humans differently, not as primitive, weak creatures, but as beings capable of intelligence, ingenuity, and adaptability. As evening fell, the golden light of Virelia's twin suns faded into the soft glow of the moons. Eli reflected on the day's work. The queen's condition had improved dramatically, but the real achievement was subtler. Her perception had shifted. She now recognized that humans could succeed where even advanced alien science struggled, and that persistence, observation, and creative problem-solving were as valuable as any technological advantage. For the first time, Eli felt that humanity's reputation on Virelia was no longer defined by weakness, but by intelligence, adaptability, and resilience. The queen, once mocking and dismissive, had begun to understand the value of perspective. And in that understanding, a fragile alliance was forming, one built not on fear or power, but on mutual respect and recognition of skill. The day had been long and exhausting, yet it had also been profoundly revealing. Eli had stabilized the queen's condition, challenged her assumptions, and begun to shift the perception of humans in her court. He knew that the final phase of treatment awaited, but he also understood that he had accomplished something equally important. He had earned the queen's acknowledgement, and perhaps even her respect. As he prepared his instruments for the night, Eli understood that the challenges ahead would test both his skill and his patience. The disease, though weakened, could evolve, and the queen's pride could still interfere with progress. But for the first time, he felt a quiet confidence. Humanity's ingenuity, adaptability, and persistence had proven themselves in the face of doubt and skepticism. And as he glanced once more at Queen Liara, seated with her regal composure softened by newfound insight, Eli realized that the journey was no longer just about survival. It was about proving that humans, though seemingly fragile, could inspire respect, change minds, and navigate challenges with intelligence, patience, and heart. The first true victory had been achieved, but the final revelation was yet to come. Humanity had shown its edge, and the Queen, once mocking, would soon understand just how indispensable that edge could become. The palace was quiet, almost serene, as the first light of Virelia's twin suns spilled into the chamber. Eli Carter entered with calm, steady steps, carrying only the instruments necessary to complete the final phase of his work. Queen Lyra sat in her usual elevated position, her posture perfectly regal, but her eyes now held something different, a combination of curiosity, caution, and respect. The disease that had once challenged her very life had retreated, weakened by the careful guidance Eli had provided. Yet he knew that even the smallest misstep now could undo the progress made. "You return, human," the Queen said, her voice measured, softer than it had ever been. "It seems your methods have merit, perhaps even wisdom." Her eyes studied him closely, not with mockery, but with acknowledgement. "Tell me, do you believe your work here is complete?" Eli shook his head gently. "Not yet, Your Majesty. There is still one final phase. It is minor compared to what we have accomplished, but it is necessary to ensure full recovery and stability. After that, the disease will no longer have power over you." The Queen inclined her head, silent for a moment. "Very well, I will allow this final phase. But know this, my people and I will watch your every move. One misstep, and it will confirm the doubts we once held about your species." "I understand, Your Majesty," Eli said calmly. "I do not take your caution lightly. Every action I take will be precise and careful." He began by reviewing the accumulated data from the past days. The Queen's vitals were steady, her energy flows harmonious, and the disease's traces were diminishing steadily. Yet subtle variations remained, invisible to anyone but a trained observer. Eli's task was not to force the final cure, but to guide her body gently toward complete recovery. It required patience, observation, and an understanding of both Virelian biology and human intuition. As he adjusted instruments and introduced the last subtle interventions, Eli noticed the Queen observing him more closely than ever. Her golden eyes, usually so proud and unyielding, now carried a mixture of fascination and contemplation. She had mocked him when he first arrived, dismissed his species as primitive, yet now she watched in quiet awe as he guided her body toward recovery with a blend of intelligence, patience, and adaptability. "You act with care and precision, human," the Queen said quietly. "I observed many species claim skill, yet few succeed where the most advanced science fails. You succeed." Eli nodded, his focus never wavering. "Success is not about proving superiority, Your Majesty. It is about understanding, guiding, and achieving results without unnecessary risk. Strength comes not from dominance, but from insight and adaptation." The Queen's eyes softened, though her regal composure remained intact. "Insight and adaptation, qualities I once believed irrelevant to a ruler, and yet I see now their power. You have taught me a lesson beyond your species' fragility. Perhaps humans are underestimated at our peril." Eli continued his careful work, adjusting minute parameters, observing the subtle shifts in energy, and guiding the Queen's body toward complete recovery. Each intervention was small but deliberate, encouraging her natural defenses while suppressing the last vestiges of the disease. The instruments confirmed the steady improvement, and Eli's confidence grew, though he remained vigilant. Hours passed, and the Queen's energy returned fully. Her breathing was calm, and even her skin radiated warmth and health, and the disease, clever as it had been, had no foothold left. Eli took a deep breath, his work nearly complete. He had not only stabilized her condition, but had guided her body to full recovery without a single invasive procedure or forceful measure. The Queen observed him silently, her expression unreadable at first. Then, slowly, she spoke. "Human, I once mocked your species for weakness. I dismissed you, your methods, your very presence. Yet you have proven far more than I anticipated. Not only have you healed my body, but you have taught me that intelligence, persistence, and observation can rival any technological advantage." Eli bowed slightly. "Your Majesty, humans survive and thrive not because of brute strength, but because we learn, adapt, and persevere. We do not always follow the obvious path, but we find the way forward. That is how we endure." The Queen leaned back, her gaze softening further. "Your words, they carry truth." My people value strength, precision, and certainty, yet I have learned that adaptability, patience, and understanding hold a power we often overlook. Perhaps this is a lesson not only for me but for Violia as well. Eli continued observing, making minor adjustments to ensure full stabilization. Each intervention, each subtle guidance was reinforcing the queen's recovery. The disease had retreated entirely now, leaving her body resilient and balanced. Eli felt a quiet satisfaction. The mission had succeeded, but more importantly, he had demonstrated humanity's ingenuity and perseverance. "You have changed my perception, human," the queen said softly. "I now see that humans are more than we believed. You have brought insight, patience, and ingenuity to a challenge we thought impossible, and in doing so, you have earned my respect." Eli nodded respectfully. "That is all I hope to achieve, Your Majesty, respect earned through results and understanding, not arrogance or force." The queen studied him, her golden eyes reflecting a mixture of awe and contemplation. "Your methods, your approach, it is unlike anything I have seen in my life. Perhaps I have been too rigid, too reliant on protocol and certainty. Perhaps humans teach lessons that no rules can convey." Eli smiled faintly. "Sometimes the greatest strength lies not in knowledge alone, Your Majesty, but in the ability to observe, adapt, and act with patience and precision. Humans have survived impossible odds by learning to see what others overlook." The queen inclined her head thoughtfully. "Your species, underestimated by many, yet capable of brilliance. You have healed me, and in doing so, you have challenged the assumptions of my people. Perhaps humanity deserves consideration beyond what we have given." Eli's work continued until the final parameters were set, and the instruments confirmed complete stabilization. The queen's body was fully recovered, her energy flows harmonious, her vitals steady. The disease that had once mocked her superiority had been defeated not by force, but by subtle guidance, observation, and human ingenuity. "You have succeeded, human," the queen said finally, her voice carrying both relief and admiration. "Not only in healing me, but in showing the value of your species. You have earned more than my acknowledgement, you have earned my trust." Eli bowed deeply. "Thank you, Your Majesty. I am honored that you recognize what humans can achieve. My goal was never to prove dominance, only to demonstrate the power of understanding and adaptation." The queen studied him in silence for a long moment, then spoke again. "I once believed humans were fragile, limited, and incapable of what my people could achieve. You have proven me wrong. Perhaps it is time that Violia reevaluate its assumptions, not only about your species, but about the nature of strength itself." Eli nodded. "Strength is not always physical, Your Majesty. It is intelligence, creativity, persistence, and the ability to see what others cannot. Humans endure because we adapt, and we persevere even when odds are impossible. That is our advantage." The queen leaned forward slightly, her eyes locked on his. "I underestimated you, human, and in doing so I have learned a valuable lesson. Your people are far more capable than I imagined. Perhaps, one day, humanity will teach the galaxy what we have seen here today." Eli returned her gaze steadily. "I believe humanity has always had potential, Your Majesty. We are often underestimated, but our greatest strength lies in our ability to overcome, to adapt, and to persevere." A quiet silence filled the chamber as the queen reflected on his words. For the first time, she allowed herself to acknowledge not only the result of his work, but the subtle brilliance of the human mind. She had mocked him, dismissed him, and yet he had healed her body, earned her respect, and proven that humans were far from fragile. Finally, she spoke, her tone resolute. "Human, I once mocked your primitive disease as a flaw, a weakness. But now I see it differently. It is not a mark of weakness, but a testament to resilience, ingenuity, and determination. You have shown me the strength of your species. And for that I am grateful." Eli felt a quiet warmth at her words. The queen's acknowledgement was more powerful than any accolade or reward. It was proof that humanity's ingenuity, adaptability, and persistence had not only healed her, but shifted her perception of what humans could achieve. "You have restored more than my health," the queen continued, her voice steady. "You have restored my understanding that even the smallest, most underestimated species can hold wisdom, strength, and insight beyond expectation. Your work will not be forgotten, human. Your people have earned respect where none was expected." Eli bowed again. "Thank you, Your Majesty. It has been an honor to serve and to demonstrate that humans can rise to challenges others might deem impossible. The Queen studied him one final time, her golden eyes reflecting both pride and contemplation. Perhaps, human, this is only the beginning. Your species has proven its worth, and I will ensure that this lesson is carried forward. Not through force, not through dominance, but through recognition, understanding, and alliance. Humanity is underestimated no more. As Eli left the chamber, he felt a quiet satisfaction, a sense of completion. The Queen's condition was fully stable, her respect earned, and humanity's reputation on Violia transformed. He had not only healed her body, but had demonstrated the ingenuity, patience, and adaptability that defined humans. Outside the palace, the city of Violia shimmered under the twin suns, and the subtle energy that had seemed so daunting before now felt like a quiet acknowledgement. Humanity had made its mark, not through power, aggression, or dominance, but through intellect, perseverance, and understanding. Eli Carter knew that the journey was far from over. There would be more challenges, more scrutiny, more opportunities to prove humanity's value in the galaxy. But for now, he had achieved something extraordinary. He had shown that humans, once dismissed as fragile, could heal, teach, and inspire even the most powerful and skeptical rulers. And as he gazed at Queen Liara one final time before leaving the palace, he understood a truth that would stay with him forever. Underestimated or not, humans had an edge that no arrogance or pride could dismiss. Adaptation, intelligence, and persistence were the tools of survival, and in their mastery, humanity could achieve greatness beyond expectation. For the first time, Eli felt that humanity's place in the galaxy was no longer uncertain. The Queen, once mocking, had recognized their worth, and in her acknowledgement a quiet alliance had begun, one that would shape the future in ways no one could yet predict. The mission was complete. The Queen was healed, humanity's ingenuity had been recognized, and the galaxy would never underestimate them again.